Hello, my name is Justin Schleider, and welcome to my 10-minute primer for the discussion on restorative practices in health and physical education, shifting the norm from punitive to reparative. So again, this is the final discussion based on the articles that together created the Preparing the Next Generation of Health and Physical Educators to Become Trauma Invested. You can find that in the Joe Bird article, volume 91, issue 9. If you look up top, there is a translation. I apologize for it being so small, and it probably is not the best with accuracy. However, it is better than nothing. So we start off with a land acknowledgement. I am currently living in central New Jersey. I was born in central New Jersey, and this is the land of the Lenni Lenape. You do a quick search, talks about how the Lenape made up Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Lower New York, Eastern Delaware. What I thought was kind of cool is they had a matrilineal clan system. So the idea is that the mother was where the link went, where, as we know, this society is very patriarchal. Also, I saw one that said matrilocal, that they lived with the mother's family after they got married, which I thought was very interesting. So they were very progressive as far as we would think. Women had land rights, and the land rights were to farm, not to own the land. The clan owned the land. So a little background on the Lenape. So when we do the critical conversation, we'll do our intros, we'll have an overview of the article, which I will give you. Then we'll go into breakout rooms to have some discussions about restorative practices, restorative justice, do a quick whole group discussion, and then we'll have a take-home message. When we talk about restorative practices, it's really the idea that we're working on the relationships with our students. And if we look at in the broader perspective, our coworkers, our guardians, our administration, everyone we come in contact with. When we look at it in pedagogy or praxis, then it would be a lot of the relationship between the teacher and the students, or any adults in the room and any students. You'll hear a lot about restorative justice. And specifically, restorative justice in schools is about the idea of repairing harm, or what do we do after there's been conflict. However, restorative justice is just one part of restorative practices. When you look at the Shop Foundation, they have a really cool graphic that tells a lot about what restorative practices are. So again, we're going to look at what are the needs of the school community. We're going to look at building healthy relationships between educators and students, which again, that's a very broad topic. We could talk for hours and hours about each one of these. We're going to look at how we can reduce, prevent, and improve harmful behavior. And a lot of this is before conflict has happened. So how are we creating communities of joy and respect? We have repairing harm and restoring positive relationships. That would be a little more of the restorative justice aspects. And finally, how we can resolve conflicts and hold individuals and groups accountable, which is a really big part when we talk about the accountability. A lot of people see restorative practices as being soft, as kids having no consequences. You would think of the idea that it's just wildness or mayhem. And that's not the truth at all. It's a really different perspective or way of looking at things where we try to work with the students instead of against the students. And in the article, you'll see where we talk about power with versus power over. When we come to the conversation about the article, we'll introduce ourselves and we'll talk about our pronouns and identities. And I think that identity is so important when it comes to relationships. It's so important that I've actually structured one of my classes around the idea that you don't actually know someone if you don't know their identities. And that's one of the prompts we talk about. Can you really know someone without knowing their religion, what racial group they're a part of, their ethnicity, their culture? How deep is your relationship without knowing those things? So after we do that and we build some community, then we'll talk about what are some restorative practices that you're aware of. What do you engage in? Because again, I don't want to come across as an expert because I'm not. I know that I've started in my classroom and I have read a lot and I've learned a lot, but I'm in no way, shape, or form the expert. There are a lot of people doing this out there and might not even realize that their practices are part of restorative practices. And then we're going to talk about what are some ideas you want to engage in but haven't done yet. And then where are the gaps, maybe things we might miss. A key question is going to be, like we talked about earlier, how does a person's identity impact the restorative practices? And then we can get into the idea of how do you learn about your students, because that's really the idea, is how do you learn about them and how do they learn about you, who you actually are and what you stand for. And then lastly, we can share out some resources, some knowledge we have, or some resources that people can take away with them and really look into things. So that's what we're going to talk about. Again, huge topic that we're just barely going to get to the beginning. This should be a really good discussion. I hope to see you there.